to give our audience a moment to join us. How is everyone doing today?
We're doing great.
Doing great.
Awesome.
All right, I see that the attendees are rolling in. Welcome, everyone. We're ready to get started with today's webinar, which is about how technology is being used to provide clarity in today's market uncertainty. Our webinar today is brought to us by HomeGenius. A few housekeeping items before I turn things over to the panel. We will be having a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. You can submit questions for the panelists at any time by using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. HousingWire will be recording today's webinar, so if you miss anything or want to forward it to everyone, you'll be able to do so. The webinar will be hosted on the webinars page at housingwire.com. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Sarah Wheeler, our editor-in-chief.
Thank you so much, Allison. So excited to be here today. As she said, I'm Sarah Wheeler, editor-in-chief at HW Media. And our topic today is how technology is being used to provide clarity in today's market uncertainty. I'm joined by two experts, Steve Gaenzler, the Senior Vice President of Products, Data, and Analytics for Radian and HomeGenius, and Jose Perez, the Senior Vice President of Sales at HomeGenius. They bring a unique perspective to weathering the storm and succeeding in today's market, and I'm really excited. Steve and Jose, welcome.
Hey, Sarah, how you doing?
Thanks for having us.
I'm great. You know, the format for this webinar is a bit different. It might sound more like a podcast. That's kind of what we were going for today. So we have a lot of really interesting discussion back and forth, and we'll take questions at the end, as Allison said. So, you know, for our audience, this is your opportunity to get in on it and engage with us. We have a lot of really interesting topics on technology and succeeding in this market. So let me lay some of the groundwork here. So, you know, coming off of 2 years of a pretty insane housing market, we've seen it shift quickly over the last 4 or 5 months, and we've had increased volatility this summer due to rising interest rates. So in a very short amount of time, as our audience well knows, we saw mortgage rates rise 2 points off the lows, which threw companies into overdrive and caused no end of stress for real estate agents and their potential home buyers who are trying to figure out how much house they could afford when these things were fluctuating so much. To add even more complexity, the situation with housing inventory, which typically rises with rates, right? Rates go up, and so there's more out there. It hasn't really improved that much. So we're still seeing rising home prices. In fact, just today, we reported on the Case-Shiller index, which showed that home price appreciation was starting to slow down in June. Now that index lags a little bit, we all know, but the headline that I think sticks out to me is that the slowing was, oh, we just had 18% home price growth. So we're down off of 19% and 20% in April and May, but come on, 18% home price growth after, you know, the last 2 years of huge home price growth. So it's a rough market for buyers and the real estate agents and brokers trying to serve them. And that's why we're having this today. So Jose, I want to start this discussion with you. Why should agents be looking to invest in technology right now? They have a lot going on, and that's kind of maybe not on at the front of their thinking right now. So, but from your perspective, why is this a good time?
Well, I think you talk about the previous 2 years, and I think we all know, you know, good agents will always be good agents, but there's a lot of agents that, you know, maybe were not doing things, you know, as efficiently as they could, but they were riding the wave, right? So everybody looks good when the market's as hot as it was. And so I think today the smart agents that are looking ahead are looking for ways to differentiate themselves and really get back to basics of, you know, providing a lot of value, providing a lot of intelligence, transparency in every aspect of what they do. And the more they can invest in themselves and in technology, I think that they put themselves in a position where they're going to shine compared to those who, you know, again, rode the wave, never been in a tough market like this. I was in a conference not too long ago talking about, you know, most agents, you know, in the last 2 or 3 years have never seen a downturn, have never seen interest rates, you know, as low as they were. And now all of a sudden that's all changing. And so they're going, wow, what happened here? And again, the good agents are going to invest in themselves as they always have. And I think that today, with the advances that have been made, you know, not just with our company, but really in the whole industry from a technology standpoint, there really is no excuse not to tap into those things and do things maybe a little bit different than you did them in the past, and maybe a little less manual, a little bit more, you know, data focused, and a little bit more intelligence focused.
That's really great. Let's talk about, you know, let's go at the very beginning. You know, how is it helping the home search? Because that's where we all start.
Yeah, let me jump on this one, and I'll say this too. I think when it comes to agents and even loan officers, other participants across the spectrum, it's not really just centered on tech and urgency around one segment. Consumer behavior has just changed, and so a lot of this urgency that we're talking about is driven by a response to the consumer. COVID, we had changing consumer behaviors before COVID came along. Right, COVID has kind of exponentially accelerated the shift in consumer behavior and how they interact in a lot of different industries. And so real estate, lending, they're not going to be impervious to those changes. And so I do think part of it is that there's great tech out there that's being developed that helps to create efficiency, create transparency, create a better experience. And so there's a natural desire for participants in real estate and lending to want to use these technologies. And so I think, to your original question on urgency, I think it's just natural, right? Jose says good agents want to be good agents, right? Good loan officers want to be good loan officers. That's always the case. I also think there's an opportunity that, being contrarian is difficult, but when markets do shift, often that is the time to invest in yourself and in technology, because you don't know when it's going to shift back. I mean, we're in a very unique market. To your point, Sarah, we have an economy that is, arguably in certain capacities still very strong, in other capacities is weakening. Yet we have massive dislocation still in the supply of housing relative to the needs of housing. And so we have a lot of dynamics that are really unique to this particular market cycle. And so we don't know when it's going to change. We don't know when it's going to go back the other direction. So I think investing is something that a lot of participants can do today in these technologies, and therefore separate themselves when the market comes up. And you're not trying to kind of catch up to those that were kind of the leaders of adoption in that situation. You asked a question about search, in particular, kind of the front end, right? Search, historically a very time-consuming, very frustrating activity for almost everyone involved in the process. And where this can change is how you personalize it. So what are the tools that allow those that are involved in search? And again, it's expanding. Agents are typically focused on search, consumers focus on search. Now more than ever, even loan officers and other participants in the process are kind of getting involved in encouraging that behavior for consumers. And so I think the big difference from a tech perspective is how technology is taking a process that has historically been frustrating. If I'm looking to buy a house, right? If I'm a buyer, I'm typically going out and I'm looking at potential properties that an agent is sending me, or maybe I'm doing my own search. But I am going through and I'm searching lots of pictures and lots of data, lots of information that historically has either been kind of standardized and not really personalized, right? I look at beds and bathrooms and square footage, but those aren't necessarily the metrics that are going to really connect me to a property as a buyer, right? And my personal cognitive kind of emotional decision making is not really influenced by number of beds and bathrooms. It's all the other stuff around it. And so how does technology make that difference? I'll give you an example. Right? And Jose mentioned it a little bit, but computer vision is an area that I think is going to be a game changer in this industry, because there is so much emotion tied to a transaction of real estate, right? Lending against real estate. And so the ability to look inside of a home without visiting the home and having standardized responses being generated are really, really valuable to consumers, to agents, to everybody, right? So imagine going in and I'm a consumer and I'm an investor and I just want to buy fixer-uppers, right? I don't want a move-in ready house. I now have the ability with computer vision technologies that are out there to identify rooms by condition or property by condition without ever visiting it. And so the recommendations that might come to me through a search engine can be influenced by things like condition. And so if I only want, low quality homes because I'm going to fix them up, great. Let me search for those and save the time and effort of going through all the pictures and saying, that kitchen needs to be fixed up or that bathroom needs redoing. I can avoid all that simply by using some of these technologies to impact my search experience. Voice-based search, right? Making it really efficient for consumers to talk into an application, right? I'm looking for a property on the Upper West Side. I want to be between the 15th and 30th floor of a condominium building. I want a view of the Hudson River, right? I want a doorman. Other types of information that I can just use, and that metadata can be transferred into search to impact that search. Really personalized, really convenient for consumers, and then the agents and others that are supporting them.
And if I could add to that, Sarah, Steve's talking about consumers and search there, but as I said in the original question, the market is slowing down. Agents, loan officers, anybody touching the transaction, quite honestly, title agents, have to look for ways to do business much more efficiently. And to Steve's point, there is technology available today that allows an agent, for example, to price a property in under 5 minutes using some of the things that Steve's talking about, compared to the way they do things, that they have done these things historically, which takes them 30, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, because that process is so manual. But because of advancements in algorithms, artificial intelligence, price indices, et cetera, agents can put themselves in a position where they can do in 3 or 4 minutes what they used to do in 45, which means that they can provide much more value to their customer and provide that value to many more customers than they may have done so in the past because of the time constraints.
I sold my house and then bought a house this summer, just like about a month ago. And I cannot tell you how frustrating it was, to your point, going through those just thousands of listings or hundreds of listings, whatever, but thousands of pictures, because like, say I only care about the kitchen. It might be number 10 on the number, you have to sort through 10 photos to get to a kitchen on this one. The next one, oh, it's the first one. The next one, you don't know. I mean, it's just like a complete crapshoot when you go on different sites to try to find out what it is that's important to you. So the idea that I could have searched, something that was really important to me in that sort of much more of a filtered way, instead of just like those basic like bedrooms, bathrooms, something like that. That would be amazing.
And I think that's the personalized experience Steve is talking about. Think about anything else that you buy, not the least of which is a $500,000 or $1 million home. Everything is personalized, right? I order my plane ticket or buy my plane ticket. I see what seat I can move my seat. I've got points that I get. I know when my flight's going to be on time. I know when I'm getting upgraded. That's just one example. You could book hotels that same way. You could, order a pizza that same way. And that experience is what consumers are used to. So whether they're dealing with the lender, with the real estate agent, with the title agent, that's the experience that they expect. So I just also bought a home, and the closing agency is in Georgia, so it was a law firm. I've never experienced such amazing service as I did in that closing. I would recommend those people to everybody. It was so seamless, so amazing. I mean, everybody knew why I was there. As we walked out, even the receptionist congratulated us. It was a personalized, very, very, very satisfying experience. Listen, I've bought and sold a lot of homes, but imagine that first time or second time home buyer has never done this before. And if they have that experience versus the typical kind of opaque, just frustrating experience that you just described, how much better that would be. So you could do that at every level: consumer level, agent level, loan officer level, title agent, et cetera. It's all the same thing. It's that consumer with that expectation.
And that's going to change too. I mean, I think just in the context of the conversation, it's constantly changing. There's a lot of change going on right now in some of the prop tech, real estate tech, which is really exciting, because if you think about these consumer behaviors, they've been moving faster outside of the real estate space than they have inside the real estate space, or at least the participants have reacted to them less quickly in many situations. Right? We still seem to cheer on the fact that we're doing OCR and we can read a PDF, right? And other industries, right, segments, we're far past that. But that's where some of this, some of the investments and research that's being done in other areas is starting to spill over into this space. So even virtual reality, right? Virtual reality is you talk about the metaverse and you talk about participating in a different environment. As participants in this space, I think that's a very, very interesting proposition for the future. And how can I leverage even technologies that allow my consumer to immerse themselves right into that neighborhood, Instead of just saying, here's a virtual tour of the house, here's a virtual tour of the neighborhood, right? Walk the streets, see the neighborhood, see what the houses are going to look like, in an experience that is, again, really personalized. It's very efficient. It's very content rich, and allows them to experience kind of what they've been experiencing without having to leave their home. The participants can provide those types of technologies and services to their consumers and really help educate them. One of the challenges I think that a lot of the participants face today, the professional participants face today, is the consumers are more educated than they've been in the past, right? Now, unfortunately, sometimes more educated is not good, right? And so I think, and I talk to agents and I talk to, lenders and those communities, oftentimes they're spending their time not educating, but re-educating or uneducating, right? Actually kind of bring some reality, because the expert is still the agent, it's still the loan officer, it's still those participants, the appraisers, et cetera. They still know that market far better than a consumer generally will, no matter how much research they do. But these tools and technologies are really ramping up quickly to allow them to kind of change that relationship and hopefully create something that's not transactionally based, but relationship based. And you hear a lot about that. You hear about, shifting away from transaction and making a relationship. And you hear all the statistics of, 90% of consumers say they would reuse their agent again, and something like 14 or 16% actually do, right? And so how do you bridge that gap to really make it a relationship? Technology can help there, right? Technology can automate a lot of that interaction and that relationship management in a way that is very personalized, right? Very, very much different than in the past of a birthday card on your birthday or a basket, at birth of your child. But other things that are actually really important to that consumer, like reminding them potentially that the roof is going to hey, I remember your roof, based on the data we have, is coming up in a couple of years, right? Just maybe a reminder, can I help you out with that, right? Or your appliances need to be potentially replaced soon. How can I help you with that? And creating this ongoing relationship that is tech-based, and then using that to provide recommendations, right? Recommendations in search historically have been largely unpersonalized. And how do we get those to be more personalized? How do we allow consumers to upload images themselves and take those images and then allow the intelligence system itself to look at those images and say, that's a white kitchen with hardwood floors, with an island, with dual sinks, with stainless steel appliances, with some good natural light. Take all of that and convert that into recommendations on homes, right? And so all of these types of technologies are developing quickly and will be available, if not already, very soon.
If I could just add one more thing, Sarah, to what Steve mentioned about relationship versus transaction. Steve and I, at a conference not too long ago that you hosted, and one of the speakers said, real estate is the only industry where they're called past clients.
Yes.
Think about that. You were probably there too. Past. How could you think about someone you sold a major investment to as a past client? Because in most cases, agents are straight commission and they're going to go on to the next deal. And they, again, part of it is, maybe because the technology hasn't been there, but to Steve's point, now that the technology is here, there's really no excuse. I think the mindset has to shift and know that, especially now with the market slowing down, you have the opportunity to go out there and find these different technologies that are going to allow you to do much, much more with your clients, so that you never call them past clients. They're getting valuable information from you on a regular basis. They're getting valuable reminders from you on a regular basis that really put you, again, I'm talking about real estate agent at this point, but the same thing could apply for the loan officer as well, or title agent, puts you in a position where you're a trusted advisor in that major investment that they have, not just somebody who sold you the house. Hey, maybe you had a great relationship. And like Steve said, 90% consumers say they use the same agent again, but it's like 11 or 12% actually do, because most agents don't do anything after the fact because it's too much trouble and they're not going to get any immediate return for it. So a lot of them don't do it. And so that's where I say that with where we are today, especially with the market slowing down, I think agents that take advantage of this are really going to far outshine those that don't.
I love that you brought that quote up, because it hit me so hard in the conference where I was like, That is so true. And if you think of your buyers that way, I'm sure they think that they don't feel like they're current clients of yours. If you think of them as past clients, it's like, well, how does that feel on their end, right? And to your point, I think, real estate agents think I'm too busy, dealing with this. I don't have time how would I possibly have any sort of meaningful interaction with them after this? You talked about birthdays or sending a gift. Even that would be overwhelming if you were trying to do that manually, right? If you have some sort of spreadsheet or if you're trying to, keep up with that. And so I do think that where I think some agents might think technology sounds so cold or like, oh, how does that help my relationship? That's actually the conduit for relationships, right? It just makes it possible that you can be the human being you want to be.
Mhm.
So I had a question. You guys threw out the term computer vision, and there's lots of terms that people are familiar with now. APIs, we all know what APIs are, right? That's great. Computer vision, I think, is something that's still kind of like people are like, what is that exactly? Can you kind of explain what computer vision is and what that has to do with what we were talking about earlier on home search?
Sure. Yeah, good. I appreciate you doing that because I probably skimmed over it. So computer vision is a part of what we call the artificial intelligence deep learning segment of intelligence. Typically, it's actually broken into two. Artificial intelligence is broken into text-based, right? Text is usually text and voice, right? So everyone's got an Alexa, they got a Google Home, they got all the kind of the voice activated technologies. That's one side of artificial intelligence where we're taking text or voice and converting that into actual data to be used for something. The other side is called image recognition and computer vision. And so this is really just building and training models that can look at an image and pull out information simply from that image. I don't need to provide it any words or any context. I feed it in. Luckily, the autonomous vehicle industry has been investing significantly, billions of dollars in this type of technology over the last decade. And so a lot of other industries are now benefiting from the investment in computer vision or image recognition in autonomous vehicles. One of the challenges, and so one of the great benefits then is that we can use that type of technology to build models to do things like identify what room it is in a house or outside of a house, identify components outside of a house like vegetation or driveways or pools or hazards and non-hazards, identify objects within a house. So identifying different objects of value. And so you think about flooring. Is it hardwood floor? Is it tiles? Is it carpeting? Materials for things like countertops, right? All of these things impact value, but they also impact, right, the value that a consumer puts on it when they're looking at buying or selling property. One consumer might really want a pool. One consumer might think that's a risk, and so I don't want a pool, right? And so computer vision technology allows the training of models to ingest images, and from those images present information, create information that didn't exist before. And so it's a really, really valuable part of kind of the real estate space or the growing real estate space, because there's so much visual inspection required in the transaction of a home. So computer vision is helping agents, it's helping consumers, it's helping appraisers and evaluators, right? It's helping a whole spectrum, inspectors, a whole spectrum of folks that otherwise might have needed to actually visit a property to decipher these differences. And now we're actually advancing to what I'll call kind of the next generation. And we talk about condition. So computer vision technology, if you think about autonomous vehicles, identifying a bicycle on the road, right? It's pretty easy to do. I would say easy. I'm saying there's not a lot of things that look like a bicycle that are not actually a bicycle. Okay. And so if I look at a house, if I think about like a ceiling fan, or is there an island, or is there a stove, those are generally also pretty easily identified. Some things are really difficult, right? And one of them is condition. And that kind of concept came up because it's a very valuable part. Condition is often one of the primary drivers for that, right, decision factoring by a consumer. And so condition is very subjective, right? You walk in a house, you walked in a bunch of houses, it sounds like this summer, either online or in person, and you made a determination, right? Now your agent might have walked in with you or not, or somebody else went with you, and they have a different impression. And you say, this is great. And they say, it's okay. right? That's how subjective homes can be, because it's your vision, it's your lens as a consumer. And so computer vision models that can identify condition of a room or condition of a group of rooms or condition of property are extremely valuable, because they really, they bring together a lot of information that the human eye would normally capture and then make decision on it. But they're mathematically difficult to do, they're computationally difficult to do. And so, we're starting to see these technologies come out, which is a really, really important kind of game changer, I think, for this industry.
It reminds me of like when you use your GPS, I would always rather have someone sitting in the seat next to me who has been there and can be like, okay, no, you see the Arby's, take a left on the Arby's, take that, you know what I mean? It's not like in 1,500 feet, like, I don't know what 1,500 feet looks like. I mean, there's like 3 streets between here and there. I'm like stopping. Is it this one? Is it this one? And, GPS has gotten better to now it talks to you more like a person, where it's like, go past this light and the next one you do that. And I'm like, oh, that's what a person sitting there would do. And, it sounds like this is sort of like if my sister, who knows me really well, if she was like, Sarah, you're going to love this house because of these factors, it has the cabinets you like, it has the lighting you like. And it just feels like we're getting to a point where it's so much more, to your point. You think about the difference between this and OCR, for goodness sake. You think about the difference between this and just like data and information, that if it's not synthesized in a way that a person can easily ingest it, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, and oddly, you mentioned OCR again. OCR and computer vision are actually under the same umbrella family, but just think of how different those are, right? One is reading something off of a document. One is really creating kind of a potentially emotional connectedness, right, to individuals. That really is the personalization factor that I think we're all thinking about. And then from a tech perspective too, just kind of throw this out as well. There are a lot of other technologies that are coming up. To your point on GPS, so a lot of the showing tools that are out in the marketplace now actually will plot out an optimized route for you, right? When you say, here's where I want to see these 5 houses. Well, here's the optimal route for you to go visit these houses, right? Sometimes you actually say, well, but I need to take a break in between. I need to go to lunch with somebody. Well, okay, put it in there, and the technology will kind of route you through that process. So there's a lot of really advanced uses of some of these technologies that are now starting to become more available to agents and consumers and loan officers, et cetera.
But the recurring theme is what Steve said early on: personalization. It all feels like it's for you. And that's, again, part of delivering a great experience. Whatever you're selling is that personalization makes somebody feel like, hey, this was special. These people care about me. And I think that's a big part of what consumers are looking for.
I think especially even the consumer may not understand why something is, or it feels better or not. A bunch of us at HousingWire bought houses during the pandemic. And it was just funny because every day we're talking about the technology and the more, whether it's search or, application or on the closing side or whatever, throughout the mortgage process, we're very familiar with what's possible. And so many of us, when we bought houses during the pandemic, had none of those experiences. We dealt with the most, the very manual, paper driven, and we know how much better it can be. Your average consumer, they may not know it like we do at HousingWire, but they know what they get from Amazon. They know what they get from these others, and they feel like, wow, this process is terrible, but they may not even know why. At the same time, if you're delighting them, if you're really giving them the personalization, they're going to be like, this is amazing. And maybe they're not going, wow, it was the computer vision that delivered exactly what I was looking for. They don't know why. They just know the end result was amazing.
And they're going to remember the person they dealt with delivered that experience.
That's exactly right. And so it's the agents who are, looking out for those buyers saying, I'm going to go out there and find this technology. I'm going to utilize what I can to give that to them, even though they don't even know it's available, really.
Yeah. I think another angle on this too that I think is important, Jose mentioned efficiency early on. One of the challenges for a lot of participants in a real estate transaction is the number of different tools that are currently being used by a particular participant, right? I used to use it, as I've been a fintech guy for over a decade now, and I used to describe, fintechs is like you take like a daisy, right? And a fintech is really, they typically attach themselves to one particular problem, right? So it's like taking one petal off the daisy, and they're going to go make that the best petal they've ever seen in their life. but then the actual company that acquires all these fintech tools are responsible for putting the daisy back together again and make it look like a daisy, right? And so oftentimes that's challenging. So I do see a shift to some extent in the industry and in the marketplace and demand for tools that create more of an ecosystem, create more of a centralized opportunity for an agent or a lender or a consumer to all interact together, right? And maybe not yet a metaverse, but interact together so that they're actually sharing information much more efficiently than this person talking to that person talking to that person. And so having a centralized set of not just tools, right, for communication, but tools of valuing things. So if I'm an agent, do a search, I can instantly share that with my consumer now, and multiple. I can do it by text, I can do it through email, I can do it through other modes, through applications. And so having a more conjoined ecosystem of products, services, and technologies really does make a lot of sense. It's hard, right? It's really hard because there's so much customization that needs to happen in typical personalization experiences. But to the extent that you can kind of come to the table and have fewer points of interaction, you create a lot of efficiency. That's the other piece of this puzzle for why does anyone adopt technology? It's usually to create more efficiency or better control over a process. And we're starting to see more and more of that in the real estate space as well, where you have these ecosystems that tie together the lender and the agent and title and other parts, closing, all parts that come together much more efficiently than they have in the past.
And I think if I could give any advice to the audience, just in the real estate industry, okay, there are over 2,000 technology companies trying to sell loan officers, title agents, real estate agents, appraisers, technology. And there's so much crossover, so much inefficiency. There's like 83 categories or something crazy like that. And so to Steve's point, the more you can do to eliminate the need to go to multiple platforms, right? Because one does one thing really well and does the other things not so well. One does this other thing great, but doesn't do that. I mean, there's just so much. And the thing is, they all, again, not all of them, but a lot of them are spending a ton of money getting in front of their audience. And, a lot of folks will just take the next shiny thing without really thinking about the implications of that to what they're trying to do in terms of consolidating, their technology in one place somehow. And to Steve's point, it is very hard. I don't think anybody's really figured that out yet, but I know a lot of people are, including us, because we know that if we could get consumer, lender, agent, everybody in the transaction in one place, it's going to be way more efficient. It's going to be way more cost efficient as well. And it's going to deliver a much better experience all the way around.
I think this is a really interesting point when you think about, especially if you are not part of a giant corporation that's providing you this kind of thing. If you're more of an agent or a brokerage with a smaller number of people, like this is your leverage that you can use, right? So you don't maybe have all of that behind you, but the technology can really level the playing field for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The next question I wanted to ask you guys was about inventory. Inventory is just, gosh, if we could solve this problem, and we do podcasts and webinars, we do all sorts of things at HousingWire trying to figure out where is the inventory going to come from? What is the help that is coming in the inventory space? But in the meantime, where it doesn't seem like we're having a whole lot of inventory, we still have, people might think, the bidding wars are over. That's not what we were talking about this before. And you said that's not what you see. And we know that that's not the case in different markets. It really is very dependent, as everything is in real estate, on local markets. But it really makes it difficult for agents and brokers, as you guys said, to know how to price things, to know what is really, 2 weeks ago in my neighborhood when I was selling, I saw the market turn in 2 weeks. Like what was selling, and then we were just a little bit late to the game, and I knew it. We were constrained by other factors, but like I could see it turn in 2 weeks. And, knowing how to price when things on one side are very volatile, on the other side, where you still really don't have a lot of inventory, where you still do have a lot of demand. I think, how is technology helping or can help, agents as they're trying to figure out what the price should be?
Well, I think, and I'm sure Steve will have a deeper analysis than I will, but I can tell you just from where I sit, I think whatever you can do to amass massive amounts of data so that you're taking, yes, it's a local question, but at the same time, whether it's computer vision or whether it's indices or whatever, you do start seeing trends. And then, we don't believe that the real estate agent's ever going to go away. The real estate agent has to take that data, that technology that's being provided to them, and then use their local knowledge to fill in the blanks, if you will. Like, for example, my wife is an agent and she's in the middle of pricing a property, in the same situation, markets kind of all of a sudden slow down, but she knows enough about the market to know, okay, this is probably where we're going to end up, but there's still people out there paying more than that. Right. So luckily she's got a seller who's not desperate to get out of his place. So that's a benefit. That's not always the case, but you still need that agent with their local knowledge, but also armed with all this additional information that makes that local knowledge even more valuable as they synthesize that into something that they can help their customers with.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. I think it's, as a data scientist, finding ways to turn data into information is really critical, especially in this industry. There's a lot of folks that are not going to be able to, take just a large, bucket of data and create something out of it. And so finding tools and technologies that can create information out of data, right? Synthesize it, aggregate it, present it, curate it, all those fun things is really important. I'll give you a couple of examples. You mentioned home price indices earlier, so I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of share some kind of historical thoughts on this issue. And you actually mentioned Case-Shiller, and you mentioned June, right? And if I'm a real estate agent, or I'm even a consumer, I'm August 30th, right? I don't really care what happened in June. I care what happened yesterday or the day before or a couple weeks ago, to your point. And so one of the challenges in identifying even trends in markets is that the tools for trend analysis have been very, very poor. Indices, Jose mentioned indices. Indices are widely used in financial services around the world, right? We started with, right, the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index, right? And those are that. And then people said, well, wait a second, right? I don't want to know just like kind of the average of cross. I want to know sector by sector. And so we created indices of the tech sector, industry of consumer goods, and industries of manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it became much more personalized, right, to investors. And we need the same thing really in real estate, because if I look at something like the Case-Shiller or these repeat sales indices, your point is they're always dated. They're not timely enough, right? And so, and I'm not trying to plug, but we took that as a challenge at HomeGenius, and we actually developed the only indices of real estate that cover nationally, right? It's released within 15 days of the month end. So you just told me what happened in June. I can tell you what happened in July, and I'm about to tell you what happened in August, right? As a practitioner, that's what's really important, right? It's not the fact that I can look at an index. It's what is that index? How valuable is it? And what does it tell me? And so we looked at it and said, this is a practitioner's problem. What do practitioners need, right, to actually be able to trend analysis? We said they need two things. They need to be able to be much more granular, right? And so we've taken it down to zip code. We do it every single month, right? There are other folks that do it on a less frequent basis. And secondly, I need to be able to distinguish between attributes of a property. Like if I'm a buyer and I'm buying a 4-bedroom house, or I'm buying a 2,500 square foot home, that's my budget. I don't want to know in the market what's happening to 1-bedroom condos or 4,000 square foot mansions. And so being able to break that into something that's very, very discernible, right? And use that as a way to do what we call micro market analysis, actually looking at a marketplace as granular as that zip code alongside an attribute like size of home, And so as an agent, I can go to a consumer and I can say, you know, here's what's happening in the 3 zip codes that you're looking at for houses of the same size. And I can do that trend analysis. And I can look at it and say, you know, this is why I think as an agent, you might want to reconsider this market as opposed to this market. I can find you a similar home, but this might be a better buyer's opportunity. Or if I'm a seller, I can say, right, just the opposite. And so tools like that, more timely, so you actually get that point in time evaluation, but more granular, I think are very valuable to practitioners to allow them to get a real sense of what's happening in markets. Otherwise, it's delayed, it's not granular enough. I live in the Washington, D.C. metro area. If I look at just the metropolitan index, which is the most typical index, I'm aggregating well over 100 different submarkets, right, into that one index. That's not going to help me, right, if I'm buying or selling a house. And so I need that tool. So I think that's a part of the puzzle. The other piece is curating data, I think, to make it available for these agents to Jose's point, impose their market intelligence, right, on the data, but in a much faster way, right? So how do you curate it to allow them to go in? And I'll go back to the computer vision example. If an agent knows they're trying to price a property that they know it's, you know, within this kind of condition range, or they has this type of appliances or this type of flooring, being able to segment that market instantaneously that way and filter out all the ones that don't fit those categories, you've really created an opportunity for them now to say, now I have the right starting spot. Now I impose my intelligence by looking through these and making sure the best of the best is what I'm sharing with my consumer. And so that interactive experience powered by data science and better data and technology, I think those are the 2 pieces that really help in a market like this. Make sure you're not overpricing, or make sure you're responding in a marketplace where we do have, you know, obviously much lower listings in the US than we have in years past. We also have this year lower sales, but the ratio of sales to the actual listings is still really high, right? And so that absorption is still very, very high across the United States.
And Steve mentions time, which is important because that's why I said earlier, a lot of agents don't take the time to do this. But going back to our comments earlier about the technology being there now, it's not just about saving time, it's about an expectation that the consumer has. And imagine differentiating yourself in such a way where you can go through Steve's example of, you know, being in Metro DC, right? But being able to give real-time insights on Bethesda, Maryland, right? And be able to show that stuff right there, you know, on the spot. I mean, that's going to set you apart because people just don't do that. I mean, they just haven't for years because it took too long. And they especially didn't do it the last couple of years because they didn't really need to because the market was so crazy. But now we're back to reality and those tools now exist. So again, no excuse for not searching out and finding those tools and making yourself even better.
I think that's so interesting. Not only does this kind of technology that you could see that this helps you to price it on one end, it also helps you explain value. If you're looking at valuations, right? If you're looking at appraisal, if you have this kind of information and you can sort of means test it, you can show this is how we came up with this value. I think that's incredibly important in this environment.
Yeah. I mean, a real estate consumer goes to a portal, right? We won't name names. They type in an address, they get a price. Okay, now what, right? But unfortunately, they think that that's the price, right? That's where you need the person that's got access to even more data, the ability to manipulate, you know, that initial number, the ability to add in their expertise about the market to really give that consumer something that is much more accurate, much more real, and puts them in a position to win that business if they can have that transparent conversation without having to play defense against someone who thinks their house is worth X because they typed their address into a portal. And that's the old way of doing things in our view. I think the new way, the expectation has to be utilizing data in an efficient, transparent, and quick manner so that you can do it for everybody, not just for the 1 or 2 people that are ready to do something today.
I love that. Let's talk about the fact that you said, Steve, about, how I even mentioned Case-Shiller lags. You were talking about the indices that you guys have that's so much quicker, let's talk about real-time data. Let's talk about the difference that ingesting real-time information and being able to leverage next to real-time insights can give people. And tell me what that looks like from your perspective.
Well, this is actually, and I'll try not to get too technical and bore people to death and have them hang up on us. This is one of those things that I think is one of the big changes in our industry in the last 5 to 7 years, is the ability to stream data. And streaming data technologies have evolved exponentially in the last just 2 or 3 years. And so how do you take information that's available? So two things you need. One is you need the data to be available. So a lot of the data that we're using today just simply wasn't available even 5 years ago. And so the growth of availability of data has been superb. And then second, you've taken technologies that allow you to consume that information and then generate instantaneously information out of that data, right? And so a lot of the machine learning and other technologies that are being used are being deployed in a way that you can actually stream information right into them and therefore get instant feedback. The difference is, I think, now and going forward, the type of feedback is going to be very different. I'll give you two different, and I think very separate examples. One is, if you think about valuations, right? I can take information in instantaneously through other data feeds on what's happening in marketplaces, right? Not just buying and selling, but also what's happening, climate and noise pollution and other types of information that you can take into consideration and really evaluate that from a value perspective right away. The other way that data is changing is again, think about data not just as letters and numbers, but images and information that way. And so you think about even things like virtual reality, right, or augmented reality, where I can use data in real time. I can now see what a house might look like, right, if I change the furniture, or if I paint it differently, or if I remodel it. And so things that in the past, if I was thinking about buying a home, right, and I took that tour either in person or virtually, and I said, okay, that's kind of interesting, but I want to, I'm going to have to do some work to it. Let me go call an architect. Let me go call a contractor. Let me get their view on it, because I don't want to obviously spend all this money if I don't think it's going to work. Well, goodness, now you have the ability in basically near real time to see that, right, to understand what that looks like, and get a visualization of what that impact will be. Those are really, really, they're very different, but both of those impact the speed at which transactions can happen. It impacts that trust factor that you have, right, with the data that you're collecting, and it goes both ways. But now you have an agent who's, or a loan officer who's providing you technologies as a consumer that allow you to see the future differently, instantly, and not have to go through all these other hoops to figure out what that's going to look like. And I think those things are all really valuable from a real-time data perspective. And that's where, again, even with the index concept, right, our whole goal was to make it as near real time as possible, because that's what consumers really need, and that's what agents need and lenders need, is to understand the value of those properties in real time, right? If I'm a lender and I'm making that decision on that collateral, and I'm delayed 2 or 3 months, we hope that doesn't go down, but just think about how quickly prices went up, right? And so their ability to react. I get home equity clients come in potentially, right? And they say, I'm looking at well, having that information in real time allows you to be more competitive, right? And potentially convert more clients because you have information that somebody else might not have, that allows you to make a risk decision without feeling like you're taking on additional risk.
I think the other really important part of that for the lender is the property condition, which you talked about, right? I mean, this is one of the things that they really want to look at. And I feel like, so we've talked a lot about the agents, but there is this whole benefit to a lender if they have this information. Also, if the realtor or real estate agent and lender are working together on this, imagine, just the way that this can really help. And we see, over the last year, especially, we've seen the rise of interest from the federal level on non-traditional appraisal methods, right? On on alternative valuation methods. And we know that this is going to continue to, they've already opened up, desktop appraisals are now, permanent. We see a lot of things that are going to happen in that space. And I feel like if you have this kind of information, this does nothing but help.
Yeah, I tend to agree. There's a number of things going on in you mentioned valuation, right? So understanding the collateral that are forcing change in the marketplace. So you think about the appraisal community and the demographics of the appraisal community, right? A lot of conversation, right? I'm not saying anything that most folks on here don't know, but average age of an appraiser is well over 50 years. Over the next decade, well more than half of the existing appraisals will retire. And so we have a supply demand issue just in valuations. And that's one of the reasons that, right, the GSEs and particularly in the FHFA have kind of spearheaded both appraisal modernization, but also alternative valuations like some of the hybrid products that are out there now as well. They're oftentimes more cost effective. They're clearly more time responsive. They help to, I think, we think about valuation along the continuum. One of the challenges that we have with even closing loans is that in a typical real estate transaction, there's actually multiple valuations that are getting done, right? Whether it's a, pre-application, pull an ABM to see a product, whether it's an agent, right, working with a buyer, trying to, convince them of where they think the market should be, whether it's an appraiser, right? All of these right now use different data sources, right? They're done by different people. And so oftentimes you get a lot of unnecessary volatility in the process that actually leads to, slow down in process and delay. And so to the extent that there is a future state of tools that can be used by, right, consumers, agents, and lenders with their own touch on it, we're in, I think, a much, much better place. The other area that I think has been a big focus is on the potential or the possibility for bias. And a lot of conversation, especially within the administration now, about how do we improve lending standardization, right, across the United States in ways that are different than kind of the old redlining concepts. Right now, they're almost and oftentimes they're subliminal, right? Human behavior is such that people, I have a belief that most people are good, all people are good. And so some things are just subliminal. They just happen without knowledge. The value of models is that models in many situations are void of some of those inferences that create bias. You mentioned computer vision. I'll use that as an example because when we build computer vision models, right, we don't provide any information into the models other than the images and some labels, right? We don't tell it who owns the house. We don't tell it who are participants in a transaction about that house. We don't tell it where the house exists. And so if you think about the ability to potentially help to mitigate or at least inform where there might be potential bias, computer vision is a great new technology that can assist in that because, again, it doesn't have those natural variables that might lead towards some sort of impact on from a bias perspective. We put in a property image. It doesn't know if it's in an area that needs revitalization, has been downtrodden, or if it's in a luxury area, right? A poor quality is a poor quality. A high quality is a high quality. And so those, I think, are really valuable technology advances that are helping out in an appraisal perspective in some of these different situations as well.
I'm very passionate about this topic. Appraisal bias is something that we've looked at a lot, and of course, we know that the federal government now is also extremely interested in how we combat that. And I think your point is so well made because the more points you have to say this is why this valuation is this way, and really be able to show how that compares in those very specific ways in the property condition, in these countertops and these countertops, it really builds a picture that you can rely on then, and that can be defended, but also that people can know that, hey, we're coming to true value here. Which, to your point, there's so many parts of the process where you need to know what that is, whether you're the lender, the consumer, the real estate agent. And so I feel like there's so much promise here that not just promise, but like this can happen now. So that's very exciting.
Trust and repeatability, right? Those are the two things that, right, I think is the goal for all of us in this process. And if you have the tools to help build that trust relationship, that relationship will last forever. And it won't be a transaction, it'll be a relationship.
that brings us full circle to what we started with, which was like technology, leveraging that technology so that you can really have a relationship with your buyer, your borrower, whether you're the lender or the real estate agent. It's the relationship that we want. It's the technology. So, we just have a few minutes here, but I would love to have last thoughts from both of you about why now and why someone should do this. If I was listening to this, I would feel like there's a lot of really great information. And I appreciate that it's been a thought leadership, talk, not just like, hey, here's what we do, but like, here's where the whole industry is going, and here's where consumers are going, and here's how we help them get there.
I'll let Steve kick it off.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, look, I really feel like this is a terrific opportunity to be in this segment. It's almost like a renaissance, right? Where we've seen, I always used to tell people, I don't want to be the Atari, right? As a product guy, because Atari was the first, but they're also out, right? And so there is great benefit from kind of listening and learning and then developing and putting out to market. And I really feel like we're at a spot where it's almost a renaissance opportunity in real estate technology to really think about, we're not just trying to attack one or two or different pieces of the puzzle. Let's think holistically about that experience, the consumer journey. And there is a ton of technology that's coming up that has the consumer in mind first. But let's face it, this triangle, this circle, this requires a consumer, right? The lender, the real estate agent, none of them are successful if the consumer is not happy. And so focusing on that consumer and the consumer journey, not just during a transaction, but through their relationship with their own home ownership experiences, I think it's where we are. And we've built off a lot of great, prior technologies and prior companies that have helped to lead it. And I think we're in a really, really fascinating spot for the future.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just add, just at a very high level, that I think that a lot of what needs to happen right now, if you are serious about your career, I don't care what part of the industry you touch, you have an opportunity to really differentiate yourself. But you have to think different, right? I'll never forget the first time I got in a Lyft or an Uber. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. This is different. I've never been in a cab again since that day. All right. But I still see people taking cabs, and I wonder, why are you taking a cab when you can take a Lyft or an Uber? And I think this is the same way. I mean, LOs maybe get some tool from their lender. Agent gets a tool from their MLS or from their broker. There's a better way. There's a better way, and you just have to have a different mindset and understand that that's what consumers are expecting. But you have to change your mindset in order to be able to fulfill that, in our opinion. And the tools are out there right now to be able to do that very successfully.
Well, and this is the market that tests and that makes or breaks careers, right? You figure it out or you're gone. And we know people who made their careers starting in 2007 or 2008. And this isn't the same situation at all, but it is a trying market, and it's gonna test people. Well, Steve and Jose, I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for the discussion. Thought it was really interesting. Great. Can't wait to talk to you guys again. And I'm gonna hand it back to Allison.
Thanks, Sarah. This hour went by really quickly. I feel like you guys touched on each part of the industry. It was really interesting to listen to. And I want to thank you all for sharing those insights. And Sarah, thank you for taking us through this conversation. If there was a question that was submitted that we didn't get to, I know we ran pretty close to that top of that hour. We will be able to reach out to you afterwards. So no worries on that end. And the recording will be available. So if you want to share it, go back over any points that you want to listen to again, or send it to anyone that you think should also take a listen. The webinar will be sent to all registrants in the next few days, and it will be available online at housingwire.com under the webinar section. Thank you all so much, and hopefully we'll all see you again soon.